Some want to bring DOGE to Ohio government. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. A large portion of the Republicans in the Ohio House have formed their own government efficiency caucus, modeled after President Trump and Elon Musk's DOGE effort in Washington. The informal group of lawmakers wants to make sure state government focuses on what it calls core functions: education, public safety, and infrastructure. The group does not have the same authority as the federal DOGE effort. It cannot demand to see records and start laying off state workers. The Ohio DOGE caucus joins similar efforts in about a dozen states around the country. Jesse Balmert, what's up with this group? Is this just a fiscal conservative group by a different name, or are they really trying to do what they're doing in Washington?
Yeah, I think they're a fiscal conservative group by another name, but the name is very popular and catchy right now, so might as well go with it. I think that it's like a deeply conservative, kind of libertarian principle to have less government, limited government, and you've seen the Ohio legislature before talk about reducing regulations or reducing spending. There's a lot of discussion right now about spending on Medicaid and how that could or should be reduced. So this is really just going to be a focus for lawmakers, particularly as we're looking at the 2-year budget, but they're not going to be laying off state employees in the same way that Elon Musk's outfit is doing right now.
The members want to focus on education, public safety, and education. Andrew, and as Jesse just mentioned, Medicaid is the biggest item in the budget, so that's health care. Are they just going to, is that what they're going to cut, or is it just not important to these folks?
Yeah, I mean, people say, and this is like an old saw in Capitol Square, but it's that beds, meds, and eds, I think is the term. So, but those are the three things. It's prisons, education, and Medicaid. And so you can talk about like reducing headcount here and there, but it's really about those three things. I think Medicaid is probably the most ripe to see cuts, just because of what we're seeing out of Washington, talking about block granting the program instead of having it being an open-ended entitlement. So, but there's obviously real-world consequences to that too. So we'll just have to see where things go, but Medicaid, I think, is kind of the biggest place where they both could and possibly could also, would make a difference.
Yeah. Brian, state government has to balance its budget. Correct. So there's not as much sort of willful spending on the state side as on the federal side. Can you compare these two efforts?
No, and first of all, who's waste, fraud, and abuse? Is it John Kasich's waste, fraud, and abuse because they've been in charge the last 14 years, as Mark always reminds me? Or is it Mike DeWine's, waste, fraud, and abuse? Could it be that it was, Auditor Faber, or before that Auditor Yost, waste, fraud, and abuse? Or Senator Houston, who was Lieutenant Governor's waste, fraud, and abuse? It's ridiculous. And on top of that, it's very unpopular even at a national level in polling. This is going to disappear. It is one of those things that is ridiculous.
That's the question I had for you, Mark. It is unpopular, at least at first, on the federal level. Could that affect what happens here in the state? Any efforts to really reduce state spending?
Yeah, it depends on how you ask the question. When people see the kind of money we've been spending for ridiculous things around the country, around the world, that polls high. Like, yeah, we shouldn't be spending that money. Remember, I'm old enough to remember, this is not a Donald Trump thing, I'm old enough to remember that Bill Clinton tasked his vice president, Al Gore, with reinventing government, and let's find out the waste, fraud, and abuse. And then Barack Obama tasked his vice president, what was his name again? Oh, Joe Biden. Let's root out waste, fraud, and abuse. You know what's different now is government's more data-driven, and AI can look at data faster, not make the decisions about to cut, but identify potential areas for humans to look at much faster, and so state government should take advantage of that.
The federal government wants to get out of the education business, Jesse, and leave it to the states and locals. Should the state, is there any talk that the state government should pull back on its Department of Education and just leave it to the local school boards?
Well, I think you saw even in the last couple of years, there's been a move to put state education under the governor's office as opposed with the State Board of Education. And then there's a lot of discussion at the legislature about spending on private school vouchers and so forth. So I think the Ohio lawmakers are going to want to stay engaged in education issues going forward.
Yet the state provides the accountability, no? Because you have test scores that gives parents, residents, and I'm able to compare one district to the next, see how my district compares to one down the street.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole problem with some of the vouchers is they're not subject to some of those, waste, fraud, and abuse lookbacks. And even when they do have waste, fraud, and abuse, I'm not sure that people pursue it.
Well, one thing Brian's right about is that state governments can have less of this, not just because we have a balanced budget, but also we have state auditors, and currently Keith Faber, who do have auditors go into every unit of government regularly to check, spot check, to make sure things are being done right.
Getting to this blunt force of DOGE, to Mark's point, Brian, we've tried this in the past, and government keeps expanding, 75% in the last 8 or 10 years. Do you need this kind of, a chainsaw approach to really make the change?
No, you don't. I mean, what you need to do is find ways to be efficient and be clear about what you're trying to do, to invest in the people that you have doing the job, and to make sure that they're paid and they have the resources to do what they need to do. That, I would hope in the 14 years that Republicans have had power here, they were trying to do that.
We all want to help people in need. Where we diverge is who's in need and how to help them. And so I would never disparage Democrats and say you don't care about people in need, and I hope you wouldn't do that about Republicans. The quarrel is who's in need and what's the best way to help them, and government ought to be doing it as efficiently as possible.
Politically, Andrew, it's hard to cut. We've seen it on the federal level where they don't have a balanced budget amendment. They can spend and go into debt. Individual Congress people have projects in their district that they don't want touched, but this person over here has projects they don't want touched, and there's not the willpower to cut spending.
Yeah, and we're already seeing that. The Republicans who have a line of some form to Elon Musk, in contrast, the Democrats have touted saving projects or facilities that might have been closed. But it goes back to the Medicaid conversation. I'm not a Washington reporter, but that's the largest number that they can actually reduce by making cuts there. And there's some moves that they could make that could potentially trigger Medicaid expansion to be revoked in some states, including Ohio. And you're talking about rural hospitals being affected. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people losing health coverage. So there are real life consequences to that. Whether it politically gets connected to Republicans, I guess that's a big question for the next couple of years.
That's where these town halls come in. I don't think there's been any really in Ohio yet, Jesse, where the Republican Congress people have had town halls that have had sort of like Tea Party town halls back when Obama was president. They're getting calls anyway, Congress people and senators from Ohio.
Yeah, I know we've reported on the number of calls that both Senators Husted and Moreno have been receiving, and I know there was some national reporting about some guidance to Republican members of Congress not to have town halls. That wasn't my own reporting, so I'll defer to them.
Yeah, all right. Let's get to our next topic. The now on-again tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods will have a sizable impact on Ohio. Ohio sells more than $21 billion worth of goods to Canada. That's more than any other state. And Ohio buys more than $17 billion worth of goods from Canada. Then you add in that Ohio farmers send more soybeans to China than any other state, or any other country rather. And Ohio finds itself in the middle of the crossfire of this nascent trade war. An OSU study on the 2017 Trump tariffs found some Ohio businesses benefited, but more were hurt. Mark Weaver, how will these tariffs, they're just beginning. We don't know if they're going to stick. We don't know what the impact is, but it's going to have an impact on Ohio business. Will it benefit or hurt them?
It's hard to say. I'm always a little bit more of a free trader on these issues, but having said that, when countries are not treating America fairly, reciprocal tariffs make sense. Tariffs meant to shield American industry that's not doing well, I don't favor those. But right now we have trade wars started largely by other countries who've been unfairly taxing and tariffing American goods. I think most Americans would rather buy American if they could. We all want to save money, but during COVID we all learned that a lot of our medicine was coming from China, and a lot of us were worried about that stream coming from China. And so buying locally might be the outcome, which should help a lot of Ohio businesses.
Brian, you worked in Detroit, worked with the United Auto Workers. They're also, what's amazing is we learn how many car parts go across that bridge, back and forth between Canada and the United States and the manufacturing process. And each one of those transfers is subject to a tariff, no?
Well, I mean, that's what Mark said is right about the fact that it has to be well thought out in terms of how you're doing the tariffs. And the problem here is that, like, for instance, in the sake of Canada, it's really a reciprocal trade situation, and they're paying their workers at the same standards we're paying ours. In some cases higher than some of the plants in the South. The problem in Mexico is that they're paying their workers very low wages, and they take advantage of that. So if you had a tariff, for instance, and the UAWs come out in favor of saying we need to fix the tariffs, but if you had a tariff, for example, a reciprocal tariff saying you're not paying your workers the same wage we're paying ours, so we're going to tariff you so that it makes it equal in terms of marketplace, you would create more jobs here. Right now, it's just chaos. It's like tariffs today, no tariffs tomorrow, tariffs here. Oh, we got a fentanyl problem in Canada, which Canada says we don't.
Amy, what are the business groups, farmer groups, what are they saying here? Have they fully grasped what this might mean?
I think they're all they've raised concerns, but the fact that many of these have been delayed or not implemented, it's sort of hard to, it's such a moving target. It's hard to just do anything beyond just express general concern. But, farmers in Ohio export soybeans. Brian was talking about the auto industry here that has parts go back and forth. The governor talked about bourbon barrels that are produced in Jackson County. Either we see countries that are blocking the import of American bourbon. So it's all interconnected, and I think the business groups probably don't like tariffs, but also they probably don't like the uncertainty right now.
It's a long play because Trump wants these tariffs to try to boost American manufacturing, but American manufacturing is going to take more than 3 years to build auto plants in Ohio or in Indiana. Does the public have the patience to deal with a little bit of pain right now, higher prices, but 5 years down the road there might be an auto plant that gives jobs?
It's hard to say. It's also hard to say if people are going to connect, like, hey, I have to pay more for this product, and it's because of this tariff that was approved by this administration. And in 3 years, maybe, this plant will be built. So it's a lot of connecting the dots. And to Andrew's point, the uncertainty of when the tariffs are starting, when they're stopping, when they're on hold. That's causing a lot of uncertainty for both individuals and for businesses, and you're seeing that reflected in the stock market.
Yeah, and something I wanted to add actually is that tariffs kind of play well politically in that they're spectacular. You can announce them, you can tie them to some tangible development. You can say they're building this factory here because of this tariff I announced, but the actual effects play out over time. They're sort of diffuse, and so that probably benefits the politics of something like this.
And I'll tell you this: an auto plant takes a long time to get. It's not just when it gets built. So if you see an auto plant coming up in the next year or two, it takes longer to build those things than just a year or two.
And this is Donald Trump's, he's early in his administration, but he's going to be gone in 3.5 years. We don't know what the next president's going to do. It could be another Republican who keeps the tariffs market, but it could be a Democrat, or even a Republican who's more of a free trader.
Yeah, that's the problem. When we change leaders, we get different policies, and it's hard. This is one of the reasons why the stock market's having trouble right now, is because most people in business want predictability. They're not really partisans. They just want a predictable thing. And so they were going one way when Biden was in, going one way when Trump is in. This is the nature of a representative democracy.
Ohio has a trade surplus with Canada, if you believe those figures.
I do believe that. Yes.
I mean, so that means NAFTA's working, right?
Well, the USMCA opened the borders much more freely between Canada and Mexico. Now, that was a problem, especially at the UAW, because what happened was you saw a lot of products start to shift up to Canada because it's much easier to do that than it was even under NAFTA. But that was a Trump agenda item, so.
Yeah, he's the one who negotiated that
Yeah,
trade agreement,
yeah.
5-6 years ago. Anyway, Governor DeWine gave his State of the State address this week. It was a good speech. He touted Ohio's job growth, his administration's work on education, and reintegrating phonics into reading instruction. But if you were looking for the governor to unveil a bold initiative for his last 2 years in office, this was it.
As a country and as a state, we have learned a lot, and we've learned a lot more even in this last year. And the evidence today is so much stronger than it was even when the bill was passed. The evidence is overwhelming. As I've said before, as an old prosecutor, the juries came back. There was a verdict. And so, my fellow citizens of Ohio, members of the General Assembly, it's time to finish the job and ban cell phones in all Ohio schools so kids can learn.
That was about as bold as the governor got. The governor did tout his plan to raise taxes on cigarettes and sports betting to pay for a child tax credit and to fund pro stadiums. But a day later, key House Republicans announced they plan to kill those tax hike proposals. Andrew Tobias, were you expecting any big proposals, initiatives from the governor?
No, because he kind of did that in the budget bill, and so as we saw, he largely just kind of touted the priorities that he wanted funded, and encouraged the legislature to do it. The legislature is kind of like doing their own thing. It doesn't really matter what the governor says to them on some level. So as you said, a couple of the big initiatives, it sounds like they're going to come out. So I know something that the governor did announce is that he has a portfolio of things for Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel to do. They include focusing on workforce development. He mentioned there might be something with phys ed, bringing back some kind of physical challenge for kids to perform or something like that,
The Jim
perhaps.
Tressel presidential or gubernatorial fitness test.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I'm the 8-year-old me would have loved to do something like that, I'm sure.
Pull-ups. No more pull-ups, please.
You say Mike DeWine's not bold, but this is the Mike DeWine we know, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a little partial. He's a friend, and I've advised him over the years. But if you want the fancy new restaurant in town with all the cool gourmet recipes, that's not Mike DeWine. That's going to close in a year. If you want the hearty restaurant with good food that's always going to be reliable, that's the kind of leader he is.
But you've worked on State of the Stage speeches in the past. Have they changed? Are they more cheerleading and here's what I've done rather than a forum to lay out a perhaps bold or controversial or ambitious proposal?
It depends on the governor, right? Okay. And the dialogue around State of the States has changed as the dialogue around State of the Unions have changed. And so governors who've seen what presidents can do with their State of the Unions are incorporating more of that now. But again, Mike DeWine being with us for the last 4 or 5 decades, he does it his way, not necessarily the way that the zeitgeist has it go.
Brian, a lot of Democrats like the speech. A lot of child care stuff, a lot of
Because
education stuff.
It was the stuff that he didn't talk about. First of all, Site Selection Magazine, how many different Democratic and Republican governors have cited that magazine? I almost think we pay for that rating. I don't know. I do know that Newsweek last year in June, ranked us 36th in terms of our economy. I know that people are concerned about inflation. I know that a lot of older people in Columbus and other areas, because of rising property taxes, because the houses next to them are going up in value, are suffering. No talk about relief for that. He did talk about some really nice stuff that everybody can get along about, child tax credits, and having worked for Ben Espy, as Mark knows, I'm very happy to hear that he recognized him and his leadership role. But it really was what wasn't in it.
Jesse, the tax hikes on cigarettes was to pay for the child tax credit for kids under 7. The sports betting tax was to pay for stadiums. It seems like that's going nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard, but Republicans don't like tax increases.
Even on stuff they don't use.
It's true. And it's interesting. Mike DeWine has tried this approach before where he's like, well, we're not going to do a broad-based tax increase. We're just going to target these specific areas. And Ohio lawmakers haven't been too keen on that in the past. I think it's much more likely that they're going to roll out their own income tax cut, which is something Governor Mike DeWine says isn't necessary, that people aren't coming, businesses aren't saying, no, we won't come to Ohio because of the income tax rate. It just shows you, even within the same party, there can be differences of opinion about policy.
But the Brown Stadium still might get some money from the state, right, Andrew?
Yeah, House Republicans also are saying that they're planning on changing, the plan from what the governor proposed to what the Browns want, which is essentially backing a loan that the state's going to help the Browns make. And then the Browns say that money from the project, they want to build a giant stadium in a suburb of Cleveland, Brook Park. They say the revenue from that is going to help pay the loans back. So that's going to be kind of a face-off between the governor and the legislature down the road if that ends up coming to pass.
Any incentive on wins in the package at all from the Browns?
People always talk about that.
We should have to. It's got to be in there.
The Browns winning 3 games is not helping their cause.
Well, if they win 6, then they can get the money. That's not much. Anyway, the last year, Mike DeWine used the state of the state address to ask Ohio lawmakers to toughen the seatbelt law. That didn't go anywhere. Well, the cell phone ban that we heard, is that going to go anywhere?
I suspect. I mean, there's always an issue in Ohio of schools have local control to kind of set their own policies. I think the governor in the past has been pretty receptive to arguments like that. And so we saw kind of a more incremental change get passed already, where basically the state requires schools to have a plan to ban cell phones. So taking the next step, I think, would be politically popular. Something that I kind of got amused by in the State of the State address was that this idea and a couple of others are things that Vivek Ramaswamy has talked about. He's kind of the Republican frontrunner to become governor, running in 2026. And The fact that Ramaswamy is saying let's ban cell phones, Mike DeWine is saying let's ban cell phones, I think they're saying that people like the idea of banning cell
People
phones.
just run to be superintendent or principal of their school. I mean, first we're telling people what your bathroom policies need to be. Now what your cell phone policies
Protecting
need to
children
be.
across
What
the
happened
board,
to
I'm for it.
Republicans that just said local control, make your own decision? I don't know what new day.
I noticed the standing ovation, bipartisan standing ovation to that proposal. So.
Yeah, I think there's an okay amount of evidence that children are very distracted and social media can have, some addictive properties. And I think teachers are frustrated with cell phones in schools. So I think it's a popular policy. The counterpoint is always if there is a school shooting or some sort of emergency at the school, can you get a hold of your kid? And so we'll see how that argument plays out as they consider it.
Yeah. All right, our last topic. St. Patrick's Day means we are just a little less than 14 months away from Ohio's 2026 primary. It'll be a crowded ballot. Term limits have opened all of Ohio's top elected spots. Senator John Husted must run to finish J.D. Vance's term. The Republican field seems fairly set with Vivek Ramaswamy and Dave Yost leading the way for the GOP race for governor. But Democrats seem a bit frozen. Former Health Director Amy Acton is running for governor, but we're all watching to see what Sherrod Brown does. Will he run for governor? Will he challenge John Husted for Senate? Brown wrote a piece for the New Republic last week. It laid out a plan for Democrats to win back working people, but it did not lay out his plans. Brian Rothenberg, what's the word on the street? Is he going to run for something?
It depends who you talk to at which time of day. And I go back pretty far with Sherrod. He used to come to my parents' house, actually, when I was a teenager, and he was in Congress. But the fact of the matter is, he's got the fire in the belly. You can tell that from the op-ed. So if I had to be a betting person, I don't know if it'll be governor or Senate, but it sure seems like he's got that fire in the belly to do it again and to fight on behalf of working Ohioans. So.
Let's put it this way. When it comes to his political fortune, like disco, it's dead. Ohio has moved to the right while Sherrod Brown was there. I predicted he would lose this race to Bernie Moreno. He did lose this race to Bernie Moreno. There was a time when he had significant electoral power in this state. He can't even win the Mahoning Valley anymore. It's just not he's a piece of the past.
But
We'll
Trump
see
won't be on
after
the
Trump.
Well,
Yeah.
Trump won't be on the ballot too in 2026.
It's true, but the Mahoning Valley was moving red even when Trump wasn't on the ballot. Just look at the congressional race up there. That is now a solid red district. And Mahoning County itself is now voting Republican. And so it used to be Sherrod Brown would win the big urban areas, and then he'd come in with the Mahoning Valley, and that would outstrip the Republican gains. He can't win the Valley.
You gotta
What does
worry
Amy
about
Acton
tariffs.
do? Andrew? Does Amy Acton, would it be Sherrod Brown against Amy Acton? I can't see those two running against each other. Could it be like a John Husted thing where she runs for lieutenant governor on a Brown-Acton ticket?
That's to your point. That's why I have a hard time seeing that happen. Amy Acton's one of her top political people is one of Sherrod Brown's top political people. So I think that I'm sure that what you hear Democrats say is that whatever Sherrod would do if he does decide to run, they'd basically get behind that. So sure, maybe they might join tickets or something like that. But I think that Sherrod Brown has had the opportunity to run for governor in the past. Something that people say always is that he kind of enjoys the work in Washington, D.C., so it kind of makes more sense, especially Democrats, if they have any chance at all of retaking the Senate, probably they have to win in Ohio.
Democrats are kind of frozen, Jesse, until he decides what he's going to do. Allison Russo can't run for governor if Sherrod Brown's going to run for governor.
Yeah, I mean, I do think he still commands quite a bit of air in the Democratic Party and a lot of respect. And so we'll see. I think Amy Acton is running for governor, but her biggest claim to fame is how she handled the COVID-19 pandemic. And that was pretty polarizing. There are people who are still quite upset about that. So it's hard to see how that would work in a primary or maybe general.
We still have a little ways to go, but it's not that far away, especially when you've got to raise all the money you have to raise to run these races. It is now time for our final off-the-record parting shots. And Mark Weaver, you're up first.
Next time you're feeling cynical about government, go on OGTV, Ohio Government Television, and watch the investiture of our newest Supreme Court Justice, Megan Shanahan. Friend of mine, she's a wonderful lady. I was there this week. We heard the story of a woman who grew up as the youngest of 8 children to a single mother who overcame great challenges to become the lead vote getter at the Supreme Court. She's got a great future.
All right, Brian.
The one rumor that you hear all around this Columbus these days is that Dave Yost is going to be given an appointment to clear the way for Vivek Ramaswamy. and then all the other statewide electeds who are going to run are going to be appointed in their place. I think it's a good room.
All right. Andrew.
Just kind of looking ahead to next week, Senate Bill 1, which is a sweeping higher education reform. The House is looking like they're going to vote it out on Wednesday and possibly pass it, which the Senate already has approved it. And then actually, Mike DeWine, I had a chance to speak with him today, meet other reporters, and he indicated he's probably going to sign it. So just look for that coming up. It looks like it's almost a done deal.
And Jesse.
A really interesting series that my colleague Laura Bischoff did this week on dog attacks and just kind of the insufficient laws to punish the people, even if a child or a person is killed in those situations. So it's worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely. It was an excellent piece. I was on vacation last week, and we flew over the Gulf of Mexico, which Donald Trump now calls the Gulf of America, and I was wondering what the pilot would say as we were approaching that water. And he said, "We're now flying over the Gulf." So very, very wise choice. With probably a split politics on that plane. But anyway, that's how that worked out. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. You can watch us anytime on your time. You can do that at our website, wosu.org/COTR. We're also on YouTube and the PBS video app. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.